Kwon Tae-yang had been told, by 3 different cardiologists on 2 different continents, that he had 5 years. He had received this, the way he received everything that required recalibration, quietly, without expression, in the stillness of a man who had learned that emotion was a luxury, reserved for moments when the stakes were low enough to afford it. The stakes were never low enough. He sat on a bench at the Han River for 47 minutes afterward, watching the water move the way it always had, indifferent, permanent, unconcerned with the human problem on its bank. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, got back in the car, and told his driver to take him back to the office. He told one person, Hyun-soo, his best friend of 20 years. Hyun-soo received the information with the same stillness and asked what he needed. Time, Tae-yang said, and discretion. 8 months passed. He managed the organization. He managed the diagnosis. He managed everything the way he had always managed everything, alone, precisely, without letting the weight of it show in the quality of his decisions. Then he walked into a coffee shop in Seoul on a Tuesday afternoon and sat next to a woman who did not look at him like he was dangerous, or powerful, or someone worth impressing. She looked at him like he was simply the person at the next table. That was the moment his plan fell apart. If this is the kind of story that already has you, you know what to do. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next. Now let's get into it. Kwon Tae-yang had built his empire in New York, not Seoul. He had left Seoul at 22, with the particular determination of a man who understood that the world he wanted to inhabit was too small if he stayed in the city that had made him. He had spent 3 years in Tokyo first, learning the architecture of the international trade networks that moved through East Asia, with the particular patience of someone who was studying rather than rushing. Then New York, at 25, with enough capital and enough knowledge and enough of the specific quality of fearlessness that comes from having survived things that were supposed to break you. He had been in New York for 17 years. He had built something significant in those 17 years, not just financially, though the financial dimension was undeniable, but structurally. The kind of network that held because of relationships rather than fear, because of agreements honored rather than threats made, because of a man at the center of it who had decided, in his mid-20s, that the version of this world he was going to build was going to be worth building. The organization had survived things that should have ended it. Twice in the early years, once in the middle period when a rival network had made a serious miscalculation about how Tae-yang would respond to pressure. Each time, the organization had held because its foundations were right. Not because Tae-yang was invulnerable. He had never believed in invulnerability, but because he had built something that did not depend on any single person remaining intact. He was 42 years old when the diagnosis came. He had been having symptoms for 2 years. The specific kind that a man in his position either ignores or investigates privately, without telling anyone, because telling anyone meant managing their reactions alongside his own, and he did not have the capacity for that. He had chosen to investigate privately. The investigation had taken 6 months, 3 cardiologists, 2 different countries, and produced a consensus that was as precise as it was final. Hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, complicated by a structural abnormality that had been present since birth and had been quietly, methodically doing its work for 4 decades without announcing itself. The kind of condition that stayed invisible until it became undeniable, and had become undeniable at exactly the wrong moment, which was, Tae-yang understood, the only moment any condition ever became undeniable. The prognosis. 5 years, with careful management. Possibly more, possibly less. 5 years was the number the most optimistic of the 3 cardiologists had offered, and Tae-yang had chosen to use it because 5 was specific enough to plan with. He told one person, his best friend and closest lieutenant, a man named Park Hyun-soo, who had been with him since Tokyo, who understood the organization and its requirements, and who received the information with the same stillness Tae-yang had received it himself. The specific stillness of 2 men who had spent 20 years in a world that did not reward visible reaction. What do you need from me? Hyun-soo had said. Time, Tae-yang had said. And discretion. You have both, Hyun-soo had said. Neither of them said anything else that evening. That was how it worked between them. The important things were said once, completely, and then they became facts that both people carried without requiring further discussion. Hyun-soo had gone home. Tae-yang had remained at his desk until 2 in the morning, not working, just present, in the particular way of someone who is learning to be in a room that has just changed shape. That had been 8 months ago. Still here? Good. Because the story is just getting started, and where it goes next is not where you think. Subscribe and hit the bell, you don't want to miss it. Let's keep going. She was 31 years old, Nigerian-American, born in Houston to parents who had arrived from Enugu with advanced degrees and the particular ambition of people who understood education as the most durable form of power available to them. She had inherited both the degrees, 2 of them, economics and international law, and the ambition, which she had applied to a career in international contract consulting that had, by her early 30s, brought her to New York and to the specific Tuesday afternoon in the Gangnam coffee shop that had rearranged everything without her knowing it. She had been in Seoul for a conference, 3 days, 4 panels, the particular compressed intensity of a professional trip where you were supposed to be absorbing information while also presenting it, while also maintaining the particular performance of someone who did not find any of this exhausting. She found it exhausting. She always had. She had learned, over years of these conferences, that the performance of not being exhausted was its own kind of work, a second job running parallel to the first, requiring a different set of muscles and leaving a different kind of tired at the end of it. The coffee shop was an escape. 45 minutes of actual work on a contract analysis she had been neglecting because the conference had consumed everything, a flat white, and the specific relief of a table in the corner, where nobody was going to ask her a question about cross-border arbitration frameworks. She sat down next to the man already at the adjacent table, without looking at him properly. She had learned, in years of working in the kinds of rooms she worked in, that looking at men properly invited conversations she had not budgeted time for. She had her laptop. She had 45 minutes. She had a contract analysis she had been neglecting for 3 days. She did not have time for a conversation. She opened her laptop. She started working. 40 minutes passed. She finished the analysis. She closed the laptop and reached for her coffee and looked up and found the man at the adjacent table looking at her, not the performative looking of someone trying to make contact, but the specific, direct attention of someone who had been observing something that interested them and had not yet decided what to do about it. She looked back at him directly. She had learned this too, that looking back directly, without apology and without invitation, was the most efficient way to resolve the question of whether the attention was the kind she needed to address or the kind she could ignore. He did not look away. "You've been working for 40 minutes, he said, in English, without preamble. "You finished something. The quality of your attention changed." She looked at him. "You've been watching me work for 40 minutes. "I've been aware of you for 40 minutes, he said. "There's a difference." She considered whether this was the kind of conversation she had time for. She was on a schedule. She had a dinner with a colleague at 7 and a panel at 9 the following morning. "What kind of work?" he said. "Contract analysis," she said. "Cross-border." "Which borders?" "Korea and the United States, in this case." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you based in Seoul?" "New York," she said. "You?" "New York," he said. She looked at him, at the particular quality of someone who had answered a question with the minimum necessary information and had done it deliberately rather than accidentally. She had encountered this before, men who were careful with their words because they had learned that words had consequences and had calibrated accordingly. She knew how to read that kind of care. It was not the same as deception. It was the specific discipline of someone who understood that what you chose not to say revealed as much as what you said. "What do you do?" she said. "Import and trade," he said. "Among other things." She understood, from the specific quality of "among other things," that the import and trade was the part he was willing to name, and that there were other parts he was not. She had been working in international business long enough to recognize the shape of a man who operated in spaces that didn't appear in directories. She had also been working in international business long enough to know that such men were not uniformly dangerous. Some were simply discreet, and discretion was not the same thing as threat. She made a decision about which category he fell into. She was not sure, afterward, that the decision was entirely rational. It was the specific quality of his attention, the way he had said, "I've been aware of you," rather than watching, the careful distinction of it, the particular honesty, that had tipped it. "I'm Naomi Charles," she said. "I'm here for 3 more days." "Kwon Tae-yang," he said. "I'm here for 2 weeks." They talked for an hour. Not about import and trade, not about contract analysis, about Seoul and New York and the specific experience of being the kind of person who moved between those 2 cities with enough frequency that neither felt entirely like home anymore. About the conference she was attending, which he had opinions about that were more informed than she expected. About a restaurant she had been told to visit and hadn't yet found the time for. When she stood to leave, she felt, with a clarity that surprised her, that she did not want to stop the conversation. She wanted to stop the conversation anyway, because she was on a schedule. And because the man across from her had, among other things in his biography, and she had learned, in 31 years, to pay attention to the things people chose not to say. "It was good to meet you, Mr. Kwon," she said. "It was good to meet you, Miss Charles," he said. She left. He sat at the table for a long time afterward. He thought about the specific quality of her attention, the way she had looked back at him directly, the way she had asked the right question at exactly the right moment, the way she had said, "I'm here for 3 more days," rather than asking if she would see him again, putting the information on the table, and leaving the decision where it belonged. He thought about 5 years. He did not call her. He made a different decision instead. He told Hyun-soo about her on a Wednesday morning. Not the feelings. He was not yet naming what they were, even to himself, but the facts. A woman he had met, international contract consultant, Nigerian-American, based in New York. Intelligent, direct, the specific quality of attention that was both rare and, in his experience, not accidental. A person who had been built carefully by people who understood what careful building produced. "You want me to look into her?" Hyun-soo said. "No," Tae-yang said. "I want you to meet her." Hyun-soo looked at him. The particular look of a man who had known someone for 20 years and was now encountering information he was still processing. "You met a woman in a coffee shop in Seoul," Hyun-soo said slowly. "And you want me to meet her?" "She's going to be in New York," Tae-yang said. "She's based there. I'd like you to meet her." "Why?" Tae-yang was quiet for a moment. "Because I have 5 years," he said. "And she is the kind of person who deserves someone who has more than that." The office was very quiet. "Tae-yang," Hyun-soo said. "You're 40 years old," Tae-yang said. "You're healthy. You're capable of building something that lasts. You have been with this organization for 18 years, and you have never met someone who matched the quality of your thinking." He held Hyun-soo's gaze. "She does. You're asking me to court a woman you met once in a coffee shop," Hyun-soo said. "I'm asking you to meet her," Tae-yang said. "What happens after that is between you and her." Hyun-soo looked at him for a long moment. The particular look of a man who understood, completely, what was being said underneath the words that were being used, and who had the specific loyalty of someone who had watched the man across from him carry something alone for 8 months, and was not going to make it harder. "All right," Hyun-soo said. "Arrange it." Tae-yang arranged it. A professional introduction. Entirely plausible. Their industries overlapped sufficiently that a connection through a mutual contact was unremarkable. Naomi was in New York. Hyun-soo was in New York. A dinner at a restaurant that Tae-yang chose specifically because it was the kind of place a conversation like this one needed. He did not attend. He arranged it, and stayed away, and told himself this was the right decision. For 3 weeks, it was the right decision. We are right in the middle of something that has barely begun and is already more complicated than anyone planned for. Subscribe and hit the bell. Part 2 is coming. Let's keep going. Park Hyun-soo was, by almost every measure, an excellent man. He was loyal. He was intelligent. He had the specific quality of reliability that came from someone who had decided, early, that his word was the most valuable asset he possessed, and had spent 18 years protecting that asset without exception. He was also, and this was the part Tae-yang had known and had chosen to overlook because the alternative was worse, Not ready. Not ready to meet someone who matched the quality of his thinking, because for the past 3 years, Hyun-soo had been spending his evenings in ways that were not designed to produce the kind of depth Naomi would require. Not parties exactly, Hyun-soo was too careful for the word parties, but the particular social landscape of a powerful man in his 40s who had not yet decided that the alternatives to those evenings were worth the effort they required. Tae-yang found out on a Thursday. Not from Hyun-soo. From the specific quality of Naomi's voice when she called him. She called him. Not Hyun-soo. Him. He had not expected this. He had given her his contact information as part of the professional introduction. The mutual contact framing had required it, and had assumed she would use it for professional purposes, if at all. She used it on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the dinner with Hyun-soo, and her voice had the particular quality of someone who was being precise about their words, because they had a great deal they could say, and had chosen carefully what to actually say. "I met your friend," she said. "Yes," he said. "He's a good man," she said. "I can see why you thought we'd get on." "But," he said. A pause. "He's not available," she said. "Not in the way a person needs to be available for the kind of conversation I want to have. He's spending his time somewhere else." Tae-yang was quiet. "I'm not calling to complain about him," she said. "I'm calling because I think you knew this was a possibility when you arranged it, and I'd like to understand why you arranged it anyway." He had not expected this either. The directness of it. The specific quality of a woman who had understood the architecture of what he had done and was calling him to account for it, not with anger, but with the particular precision of someone who wanted to understand rather than condemn. "I thought he was ready," Tae-yang said. "I was wrong. Why did you not arrange to meet me yourself?" she said. The question sat in the air between them. He thought about 5 years, about 3 cardiologists, about a bench at the Han River on a Tuesday evening 8 months ago. "There are reasons," he said, "that I'm not ready to explain." "All right," she said, "then explain them when you are." She ended the call. He sat with his phone in his hand for a long time. Hyun-soo appeared in the doorway of his office 40 minutes later, with the expression of a man who had already understood what had happened and had come to say something about it. "She called you," Hyun-soo said. "Yes," Tae-yang said. "I was not ready," Hyun-soo said. "You knew I was not ready." "I thought you could become ready," Tae-yang said. "I was wrong." Hyun-soo looked at him. The 20-year look, the one that had no performance in it, no management, just the specific quality of one person seeing another person clearly. "Tae-yang," he said, "you have to tell her." "I have 5 years," Tae-yang said. "You have 5 years," Hyun-soo said. "She could have 50. The question is what you do with the 5. "I'm not going to ask someone to." "She called you," Hyun-soo said. "She called you, not me. She understood what you did, and she called the person who did it and asked him to explain himself." A pause. She already chose. The office was very quiet. Tae-yang looked at the window. At New York doing its Thursday evening outside. Indifferent. Enormous. Full of every possible version of what happened next. "I need to think," he said. "Think," Hyun-soo said. "But don't think so long that you waste one of the 5 years doing it." He left. Tae-yang sat at his desk until midnight. He thought about what it meant to ask someone to begin something that had an end already planned. He thought about what it meant to be the kind of man who had spent 42 years building things to last, and had now been told that he himself would not. He thought about Naomi Charles sitting across from him in a coffee shop in Seoul, looking back at him directly when he looked at her, and the specific quality of a woman who put information on the table and left the decision where it belonged. He picked up his phone. He was going to call her. He did not get the chance, because between his desk and the lobby of the building, on the way to his car, on the particular route he had walked 1,000 times without incident, he almost stepped over a man sitting at the base of the building's entrance stairs, old, slight, blind, the white cane visible beside him, his eyes unfocused in the specific way that was not vacancy, but the absence of sight. Sitting in the December cold with a paper cup and the particular stillness of someone who had been sitting in difficult places for long enough that difficult was simply the texture of things. Tae-yang stopped. He did not know why he stopped. He had walked past people in worse situations than this, in worse weather than this, on worse nights than this. He had been in a hurry his entire adult life. He was in a hurry now, in the specific hurry of a man who had decided something and wanted to execute it before the decision could reconsider itself. He stopped anyway. He crouched down beside the old man. He said, in Korean, which was an instinct rather than a calculation, "Are you all right?" The old man turned his head toward the sound. His face, up close, had the particular quality of age that was not decline, the specific worn dignity of someone who had been many things and had arrived at this particular place not through failure, but through the accumulation of a life that had taken every available shape. "Cold night," the old man said, in Korean that was precise and unhurried. "Yes," Tae-yang said. "You were going somewhere important," the old man said. It was not a question. "Yes," Tae-yang said. "Then you should go," the old man said. "But sit for 1 minute first. 1 minute won't change where you're going." Tae-yang sat on the steps of his own building, in his good suit, in the December cold, next to a blind beggar with a paper cup. He did not know why he did this either. The old man reached out, not grabbing, a specific deliberate gesture, his hand moving with the particular precision of someone who navigated the world through senses that were not sight. He placed his hand, flat, over the left side of Tae-yang's chest. "Here," the old man said. Tae-yang was very still. "This has been carrying something for a long time," the old man said. "Something it was not built to carry alone." "Yes," Tae-yang said quietly. The old man's hand remained. The December cold settled around them both. New York moved in its ordinary, enormous way, entirely indifferent to what was happening on these particular steps. Then, the old man removed his hand. He picked up his paper cup. He turned his unseeing eyes in a direction that was not the direction of anything visible. "Go," he said. "Where you were going." It was the right decision. Tae-yang stood. He reached into his jacket and left everything he had in cash in the paper cup. He did not count it. He did not look at it. He simply left it. And he walked to his car and he called Naomi. She answered on the second ring. "I have something to tell you," he said. "Something I should have told you in the coffee shop in Seoul. Something I should have told you before I arranged a dinner with my best friend, instead of arranging one with myself." "Tell me," she said. He told her. All of it. The diagnosis, the 3 cardiologists, the 5 years, the Han River bench, the decision he had made, and the reason he had made it, and the reason it had been the wrong decision, regardless of how much sense it had seemed to make at the time. She listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. 5 years, she said. "At minimum," he said. "Possibly more." "Kwon Tae-yang," she said. "Yes. 5 years is longer than some people get," she said, "and shorter than what you deserve. But it is what there is." A pause. "I would like to have dinner with you." "Not arranged through anyone else. Just us." "Yes," he said. "Tomorrow," she said. 7 o'clock. "You choose the restaurant. You know New York better than I do." "I know one place," he said. "Then that's where we'll go," she said. He ended the call. He sat in the back of his car for a moment. He put his hand over the left side of his chest, the same place the old man's hand had been, and felt, for the first time in 8 months, something that was not the particular weighted presence of a countdown. Something lighter than that. Something that felt, if he was being specific about it, like the beginning of something rather than only the end. He did not know, sitting in his car on that December Thursday, that 3 weeks later a follow-up cardiac examination, scheduled as routine, attended with the specific resigned thoroughness of a man who had stopped hoping for different news, was going to produce results that none of the 3 cardiologists could explain. That the structural abnormality, documented in 3 separate consultations on 2 continents, was going to appear materially different on the new imaging. That the cardiologist who reviewed the new scans was going to use a word Tae-yang had not expected to hear again. Improved. He did not know any of that yet. He knew only that he had sat on the steps of his building in December, next to a blind man who had placed a hand over his chest and said this has been carrying something for a long time, and that he had left everything in a paper cup and walked to his car and called the right person and said the right thing for the first time since a Tuesday afternoon in a Gangnam coffee shop when a woman had set her laptop bag on the table beside him without asking. Outside, New York moved through its December night, indifferent, alive, full of every possible future. Inside a car parked outside a building, a man with 5 years and possibly more sat with his hand over his heart and thought about tomorrow at 7 o'clock. And for the first time in 8 months, he was not dreading what came after. That is where part 1 ends, the diagnosis, the arrangement, the problem with Hyun-soo, the phone call Naomi made, the blind man on the steps, and a dinner at 7 o'clock tomorrow that is already, quietly, the beginning of everything. Part 2 is coming. The dinner, the follow-up scan, the word none of the doctors expected to say. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a comment. Did you expect the ending of part 1 to go there? And what do you think Naomi says when she hears the word improved? I read every single one. Don't go anywhere.